Hey guys, George of SoundTraxx here. This week, we're going to do a decoder installation step-by-step live for you in front of the camera using a Walther's Proto E-9, and this was a special dedicated version of the SP version of the E-9 that resides in the Sacramento Railroad Museum. So we're going to show you this step-by-step on how to do it. So first off, what we're going to do is we're going to gather the parts. Of course, we're going to use our Decoder TSU-2200 for EMD, and the EMD version has the dual 567 sounds that you would get out of the E-9 locomotives. Next up, we're going to use two of our 28mm round speakers and two of our 28mm baffle kits. Now, we're going to show you how all this goes together. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pop the shell off. And I've already done this, so it's just loosely sitting on top of the locomotive. So we move our shell and we're going to carefully set it aside. Now inside this model, you're going to see there's a 9-wire harness. Now this 9-wire harness is exactly where this TSU-2200 will plug right in. So we're going to show you how to do that. And then we have the space here in the front and the rear for the speakers to mount very easily. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get our decoder out of the package. Now, I encourage you to open the package and read all the documentation that's on the packaging itself, but because I've done this and I do this for a living, I'm going to just simply grab the decoder out of the package. We're going to pull it out of the side. Now we have our harness on each end. Now we're going to start with the speaker side. So we're going to go ahead and set this aside for the moment. We're going to go ahead and grab our protective tablecloth, or our tablecloth protecting piece of wood here. And the only other thing I did mention is I do have a section of wire. This is about 6 inches long. You can purchase extra purple wire from our selection inside in-house. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to get out our speakers. Okay, now we can set all this packaging aside. Now we're going to grab our baffles. Now this one I've already opened, and this one we're going to go ahead and open here at the bottom, and we're going to get our baffle out. All right, so the first thing is when we're doing this decoder installation into the model, you're going to notice that there's 2 rings and then a cover piece and then a mounting plate. Now the good news is that we're not going to use all these pieces. We're going to use these 2 pieces only. So this is the first ring, and then we're going to use the cover plate. So we're going to take a pair of side cutters. We're just going to trim it out of the sprue right here. So there's 1. And 2. Now the benefit of using this is that these pieces actually just simply snap together. So you can simply snap that back baffle into it just like that. And that's all it takes. Now, in an ideal world, I would recommend putting a dab of liquid plastic cement, or something along those lines in that joint, just to make sure that during handling or anything else like that, you don't have the speaker baffle pop off or the back of it pop off. But the snap is pretty good. You don't usually need it, but I'm all about insurance policies. So now these speakers we can take out. Now if you had a model that used these, you can see that these just snap together. So you could just simply snap another ring and that'll give you a little deeper baffle. Again, it depends on the model that you're working on. So now what we're going to do is we've got our 2 baffles put together. Now we're going to go ahead and solder the wires to our speaker. Now we're going to do this in series, which means we're going to come from the decoder to the positive terminal on the first speaker. We're going to go from the negative terminal on the second speaker to the positive terminal on the second speaker, and then the negative terminal of the second speaker back to the decoder. So we get our purple wires. Now, before we solder, we want to thread these wires through the holes on the baffle to make sure, because we can't thread them through after they're installed. So we'll go ahead and put this first wire through. And ideally you would cut the speaker wire to the length that you need, but it's okay to have a little bit of excess. It's not going to be a big deal. So there's a little bit of flashing in the hole. So where did I put my knife? And it's catching the insulation here. So we just Walther out this hole a little bit. And yes, that's an official term. All right, now we can put our speaker wire through. And there we go. So now we have our 2 wires coming through for the first speaker. Now let's go ahead and make those solder connections so that we know which wires are for what. So again, we see that I have the first one from the decoder on this side, and I have our jumper wire from one speaker to the other on the other side. So we're going to get some wire strippers here. We're going to strip and tin the end of the wire. This one was already slightly stripped, so we're going to go ahead and tin the end. I'm going to grab my flux, put a little bit here on the joint. And again, you don't need a whole lot of flux, just a little bit. And the flux cleans the joint and cleans the wire to make sure there's no oxidation or anything on there that might potentially prevent the solder joint from being made. So we're going to go ahead and get a little bit of, here, I'll go ahead and do this a little closer here. Get a little solder on the end of the iron. We're just going to touch where the joint is, or where the wire is, to tin the end of the wire. Okay? Now, when you tin the wire, the insulation is going to strip back a little bit, and you really don't want all that extra wire exposed. So we're going to take our cutters and we're going to shorten the tinned end of the wire so it's just enough to go over the pad. And this is a key for wire management because you don't want to have all these exposed wires all over your work, and especially inside your model. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some flux. We're going to put it here on these outer pads. The inner pads are what are actually wired to the voice coil inside the speaker. So these extra pads on the outside is where we're actually going to solder the wires to. So I'm going to put a little bit of flux on each end. Now here's a little handy tip for you. When you're working with your soldering iron, remember this part of the speaker is a magnet. And so it can jump up and try to join and magnetize to your soldering iron. So what you can do is take a tool and put one of the handles over the actual magnet itself, and that helps hold the speaker down on the work surface. So now, when I come over here, we'll get a little bit of solder. I'll grab my wire, make sure which wire is which. And there we go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to, I've got the solder on the end of the wire. We've got the flux on this joint. We're going to put a little bit of, let's see if we can move this around so it's better visible for the camera. So now we're going to take our wire, hold it over there. We're going to put the soldering iron with the solder on it. We're just going to touch it, and there, the joint's made. So now we're going to do the other side. So now we're going to take our second wire, turn this around for the camera, grab a little bit of flux or solder on the end, and we are going to make our solder joint. And that's all it takes. Now, with the flat work surface, we can pull these wires through the holes. We can line up our speaker into the proper location here. And then we can use our work surface to apply even pressure around the edge of the speaker to simply snap it in place. Now we're going to do the same thing with the other purple wire coming from the decoder. And then this purple jumper wire. Now remember, this was on the negative terminal, so we're going to go ahead and put that through the first hole in this speaker baffle. And that one went through a whole lot easier. Then we can do this one at a time, or you can do them both at the same time. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. So we can go ahead and tin the end of the wire. If you want to do it one at a time to help keep them separated because they are both purple wires, then that works just as well also. So again, we're going to cut the excess length off the end of this wire here where we just tinned it. Put a little bit of solder on, or flux on the speaker terminal. Whoops, I'm getting ahead of myself here. All right, we're going to go ahead and solder our wire here. All right, now we're going to take our second purple wire from the decoder. We're going to fish out these extra wires. We're not going to end up using them on this install, so you can keep them, cut them short. so that they're there accessible if you decide you want them at a later date. And that's what we're going to do on this particular install right there. All right, so now we're going to take our second purple wire, and again, we're going to thread it through the hole on the baffle. Yep, this hole needs to be opened up a little bit. A little bit of flashing on these baffles here. So sometimes it happens with injection molded stuff. So you may need to just pay attention to doing it. All right, there we go. Now we have our second wire through. We're going to strip and tin the end of the wire. And since I have my flux, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit on this joint as well. Okay. Grab our soldering iron. Grab some solder. Tin the end of the wire. Like I said, we don't need quite that much of exposed. All right, now we're going to put the handle over the speaker. And we're going to make our solder joint, and there we go. Now again, just like we did in the past, and the other one, we're going to pull the wires through, line it up, set it down, and press fit. Now our speakers are done and ready to be installed. So in order to plug into the 9-wire harness here on the model, we need to remove the 9-wire connector on the end of this decoder. So what we're going to do is we're going to very carefully trim along the edge. Remember, we just want to expose enough so that we can unplug the harness. So we can go ahead and trim right here along this edge. Now we're going to go down the sides, again being very careful to only cut what we need to expose. You don't want to cut a whole lot of that circuit board to be visible. I know it's easy to give an inch, take a mile, and we're going to cut a whole lot off, but you don't need that much. You just need to be able to pull the plug out. There we go. And then we can do this very carefully along the bottom here, because it does trim up around the edge of the circuit board. And then now we just simply peel that off, and now you see that my harness is exposed, and this just simply pulls off. Now ideally you'll cut this piece of insulation off, or you can just work the plug through it. Now you can save that for another installation down the line. So now we have our decoder, we have our 9-wire harness, we line it up, and we simply plug it in. You want to make sure that this plug is fully seated, or else you run the risk of having some of the connections not being made. So it should fully seat into the connector, and that looks pretty good right there. So now we simply take our speakers, we mount one in the front, mount one in the back, we'll put some tape on it, and we'll mount all this together, and we'll put the shell on it. So this is all it takes to do a decoder installation into one of these models. And you saw it live happening here step by step with all the bloopers and everything rolled into the video here. So let me button this up, we'll put some tape on this, and we'll be back and we'll take it for a test run. Okay guys, we've got the install done. We're going to go ahead and put her on the test track. We've got all our tools cleaned up. I'm going to go ahead and set it over on the track. And listen to that. We've got that beautiful sound coming out of it. That tells us that the decoder's working. It's getting commands. Now we're going to take it for a test run. So we're going to go ahead and start moving in the forward direction. We see that it's running. Move in reverse. We've got our motor control. Now let's check our lights. We have our headlight, we have our number boards, and we have the Mars light. And all of those lights light up. So now the first thing we want to do is we want to do a little bit of research on the locomotive. We want to figure out which sounds are correct. So in this case, this is a dual EMD 567 that's going to be in the E-9. So we're going to start off. We're going to take CV123. We're going to program on the main line. And we're going to set that to a value of 3. And that's going to be the dual EMD 567 as shown in the chart up here. So you're going to hear one prime mover start, you're going to pause, and then you'll hear the second one start up. And there's number 2. So next we want to go ahead and select our horn and our bell. So we do a little bit of research on the locomotive, we find out what it's equipped with, and again, using this chart here that you can find on our website at SoundTraxx.com, you can find the right selections for you. Now the last thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and go over the lights. Now in this case we have the headlight, which is on the front, but we also have the number boards and the Mars light. Now the number boards are wired to FX3, so we'll start with those. Now we want those to be on-off brilliance 1, and then the brilliance of that is going to be adjusted by CV61. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by taking CV51, we're going to set it to a value of 147, which will dim the lights down. So we're going to take CV51 to a value of 147, and the light will dim. Now you can adjust CV61 up or down to find the brilliance that's right for you. Now the next one, we want to set the Mars light. Now the Mars light is wired to the FX4 lighting output, which is controlled by CV52. Now looking at the chart in the user's guide, we see that a value of 130 is equal to a value of 2, which is the Mars light effect, plus 128, which enables the LED compensation. And I didn't mention it before, but the LED compensation changes the way the light signal is sent through the wire so that your LED will appear more animated. This is how also we came with the value of 147 for the number boards, because it's a value of 19 for the on-off brilliance 1 plus 128 for LED compensation. That way you get a more realistic tone. So we're going to go ahead and set CV52 to a value of 130. And now we go ahead and we have that Mars light going, and you'll see that expected pop that you're expecting out of a reflective Mars light. Now there are some other videos that we've done in the past regarding how to set up the locomotive with different lights, different sound effects, different adjustments to the equalizer, reverb, and so forth. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and search in the video archive so that you can find the videos that we've done like that in the past. Now, as I mentioned, this is our contest winner for the photo contest. So if you want to be entered in the next contest, or if you want to have a chance to watch and look at any of the promotions that SoundTraxx offers, be sure you subscribe to our newsletter by checking out the part on the website and subscribe to the newsletter. And that way you can get notified when we have special promotions, special deals, or contests that you can win.